takes us to the agenda. Received apologies from Councillor Pitt and Venus for lateness back joining us in time. So I will move it. So this apologies. Thank you, seconded Councillor Pitt. I will put the motion for those in favour. Aye. Against? That's carried. Confirmation of the agenda, I circulated an email late last week which explained that we had missed off the agenda the notion of the minutes of the grants review hearing committee. So we're going to add it in under 11, so it will be a new 11A, the grants review hearing committee minutes. So with that amendment, I'll move that we confirm the agenda. Seconded Councillor Peach. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Number 3 is just for noting. Number 4, minutes of the Toitū Settlers Museum, 4th, 5th of November.
Happy to move the minutes of the public part of the Toitū Settlers Museum for 5th November be noted.
Thank you. Seconded Councillor Wilson. Discussion?
On page 5.3, the director alludes to the issue on the museum reserve about cars parking associated with mobile.
Toitū.
Oh, sorry.
You're one ahead of us. Discussion? If not,
It's a later museum, not an early section.
all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. So now, the Otago Museum quarterly report. We take someone from the museum here. We do. No. In which case, thank you. Councillor Wilson, second. Thank you. And you have a...
I just briefly repeat what I just said. After the first, essentially the issue about cars parking on the museum reserve was raised, associated with mobile trading, was raised during the hearing for mobile trading on that reserve. There was an application for 5 licences submitted, and councillors Vincent Cloak, Venus and myself were involved in that process. So all I wanted to share with you was that the draft lease that was submitted as part of that process includes the ability for staff to deal very quickly and effectively with cars that are parked on. They are simply not allowed to park on the grassed area of the museum reserve, and they will be told so. And we had a commitment from a mobile trader who was part of the process, the public process, who said that they would certainly be sharing with their colleagues that it will be a no-go. So we'll hopefully have nipped that one in the bud.
Thank you, Councillor Moon. Any further discussion? Councillor Culp.
Just a wee question. Could we ask that the museum do send somebody along if we've got a report? Because the report, we can't really do anything with the report without being in a position to ask questions. I'm not disapproving of the report. I'm just saying it would be nice to have somebody along.
I'm sure we'll note that. Councillor Banvers and Councillor White.
One of the questions that I would have asked of a museum representative, but there may be someone else here that can help. Glad to see all these things happening down at the Otago Museum, in particular on 5.5, the Discovery World redevelopment and plans for a planetarium. The question I had regarding both of these is, has anyone here got any idea of just very roughly how these intend to be financed? I know that the museum raises some of its own finances, but I also note that we've been getting advanced warning of these developments here.
It mentions on page 5.5 that an application has been submitted to the Otago Community Trust, so I assume that has something to do with how it's intended to be financed.
Yes, I noted that as well. I'm just quite certain that the Otago Community Trust won't be financing both of these things to anything like their entirety. And if it's possible, perhaps for us to have someone circulate an email later and just give some idea of how they're proposed to be financed, that would complete the report from my point of view. Otherwise, very happy with it, happy to move it.
Thank you. I think it's been moved and seconded, so thank you, Councillor Members. I think it's been moved. We will circulate an email seeking clarity on that matter. Any further? Oh, yeah, sorry, Councillor Whiten.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under trading at 5.3, the start of the cruise ship season was unexpectedly delayed. Outside of some extra people at the cafe, is the museum getting any additional income? Would be the question I would have asked if someone was here.
Yes, they do. They have been very successful in operating with tours, and actually began the tours before some of the other businesses in Dunedin open. Those are pre-booked tours or can be booked immediately on there, and they do have a substantial positive benefit to their financial situation for the museum.
Can we get some of those numbers in here at some point?
I should ask that.
So I just noted one final question on 5.12, and it relates to the unwanted organisms register. I was wondering, they're hoping to import some butterfly species that are on that register, and I'm wondering, is it that the register is kind of inappropriate and that they don't pose a threat? What's proposed to be imported? Or is that the case, or is it the case that they're going to be able to import these unwanted organisms and be able to be absolutely certain of being able to contain them? So that was another question that perhaps, as Chair, you might want to ask.
I'm happy to ask that. My understanding of the unwanted organisms register with my botany hat on was that it is a list of animals and plants which have identified as possibly posing a threat to New Zealand's biodiversity if released, and as a result any applicants wanting to bring those into the country have to demonstrate to MPI how they will be contained in such a way that that threat is removed. So that is my understanding of the register.
So the suggestion here is that they don't have any containment issues at all.
You can seek clarity from the museum around the position on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any further circulation or discussion on this report? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Yes. Carried. Moving on to 6. Welcome, Park. Do you have any opening comments you'd like to make?
I'd just like to add that I'm not sure if it's clear in the report, but there was a real generosity in the people that we met with, both in Edinburgh and in Otago.
Any questions on the report? Samantha?
The same question I've been asking since 2004, except that now we have, in the case of Otago, in the case of Edinburgh, a 31-year relationship, in the case of Otago, a 35-year relationship. And the question really is, given all the expenses, given all the overseas travel, given all the staff time required to organise these relationships, why is it that we're still talking about possibilities, opportunities, a desire to share, relationships being solid and sincere? There's usually 2 pages of it. This time we have 10 pages of it. And I don't want to bore this committee with going through all of it. I hope to go through it with staff later. And
Thank you.
And no worries. But seriously, from my perspective, and I've read it slowly, the question is, why is it that we now have 10 pages of platitudes regarding the sister city thing? And really, they're vegetarian platitudes. There's no meat in any of it that I can see. So what I would like is...
Is it a question? Because
the question is, in future, is it possible to actually have a couple of pages that actually say something with some real meat in it, that has some real solid, this is a ratepayer benefit from all this expense, because I don't see any of that in this report.
Well, I'm not sure that that is necessary. Presumably you wrote the report including the information that you felt was relevant.
Yeah, it's an update on both of the visits.
Thank you.
Sorry, if I could just finish that question. Would I take my concerns to Mr. Pickford as the top manager that signed this off to have a discussion about what's in this report, or is there someone else I should speak with?
You could perhaps put your concerns in writing to Mr. Pickford and myself as chair.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Murray.
Madam Chair, I'm going to attempt to share with others the experience I had in Otaru, and I'm not going to be hopeful that Councillor Vandervis will be convinced. But before he goes to Mr. Pickford, I think it would be useful for Councillor Vandervis to take on board the comments from the delegations from that attended both those visits. Can I move the recommendation and then speak to the Otaru part of the visit?
Absolutely.
I'm happy to move the recommendation on 6.1.
Second, Councillor Lord. Thank you.
Thank you. So I've been fortunate enough to visit Otaru on 2 occasions, one in 2010 and of course one with Mayor Cull and Cara Patterson in 2014, which the report alludes to. The one thing that absolutely blows you away is the hospitality, the generosity. It's just superb. The people of Otaru highly value the relationship they have with Dunedin City. They have a genuine interest in what goes on here. They clearly are planning a visit at some stage next year, probably late next year, to celebrate the 35 years of the relationship. To help Councillor Vandervis understand what the relationship means, I think you need to go back to the original signing of the relationship by Mayor Skeggs back in 1980. There was a considerable amount of trade at that stage between the two ports. And Councillor Vandervis refers to meat in the sandwich. There was a lot of meat trade at that stage. And I think also from that 1980 signing of that original agreement, the emerging of the Dunedin Otaru Sister City Society as well, of which they have been active for around about 30 years, 29 years. And the number of initiatives that they've been involved in are numerous in terms of hosting youth exchange, for example. That there are not only students that come and study in Dunedin at a secondary level, but also at a tertiary level. And that arrangement is reciprocal as well. In terms of trade, and Cara alludes to, I suppose the economic benefits are not as great as what they used to be, but Mayor Cull, myself and Ms Patterson talked with the Chamber of Commerce about different opportunities that could exist in the future, and wearing my farmer's hat, we talked about the advantage and the quality products that we produce in this country in terms of the meat trade. We also talked about potential opportunities that Silver Fern Farms or any meat company, in fact, could have in Otaru via festivals that they have. They have numerous festivals during a 12-month period, a winter festival, a summer festival, a jazz festival. And what we did is we provided connections between the Silver Fern Farms agent, who's based in Tokyo, with the Chamber of Commerce in Otaru. We also provided connections directly to the Otaru Sister City Society as well, the Silver Fern Farms. So to help Councillor Vandervis understand, there is a real attempt to try and get runs on the board in an economic sense. They used to exist, and they exist at a lower level now, but they still certainly exist. And I know that Mayor Cull will allude to the various cultural and educational opportunities as well. But I just caution Councillor Vandervis in making comment in a negative sense, which quite quickly erodes the good work that has occurred over 3.5 decades, and with a few words that can be quite quickly dissolved. And I think that it doesn't do justice to all the good people out there that are working on this relationship, continuing to build strength. It is a really strong friendship that we have, and I personally would not like to see those sorts of comments from Councillor Vanderbus in the front page of some sort of media in Otaru, because I feel that is unjust and unfair.
Thank you, Councillor. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the other two members of the delegation whether they have any desire to speak to the motion, and then I appreciate that other councillors may have questions. I think it's better to get everybody from the delegation to have their say first, and then questions to come after that, than to jumble it all up. So that's the way I intend to move forward. Mayor Cull or Councillor Peake, do either of you have comments that you'd like to? Councillor Peake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess Councillor Vanderbus is asking a question raised in my mind, the idea of a concept of one of the world's greatest small cities. And to get to that sort of status, you have to be quite outward looking and to have a lot of connection internationally. And the best way to do that, I think, is through the sister city partnerships that we have. And we have 3 active ones. And in the case of the Edinburgh one, which I participated in, I thought long and hard about whether I could justify joining the Mayor and Cara on the trip to Edinburgh. But in the end, I thought it was worthwhile to actually just make it a threesome and to instead of the 6 that went, or was it 8? The 6, I think, or 8 that went in 2006. 8, I think, the council said. So we were a kind of a modest group, and we were marking the 40th anniversary, not the 31st, of our connection. So it was something to be celebrated. There were a number of aspects which I took a particular interest in, and one of them was the city's bid to be an international city of literature. There are 7, and the first of them was Edinburgh, and we were obviously going to get some good advice and wisdom, which we did from there, about how to perform as a city of literature. We're only 1 week away. Well, actually next Sunday, UNESCO will announce the successful bidders. Quite a number of them. We hope to be among them, but even if we're not, we will, I hope, persist with that bid in another round with UNESCO. While we were there, it was mostly in the creative sector that we were working. It wasn't a big economic thing, but there were economic interests we had. We were in the thick of Edinburgh's festivals. They have 12 festivals operating through the month of August, and the information about that was pretty revealing in terms of how much benefit, economic benefit, they could get from running festivals. And we have our own program of festivals, and I think there was some good learnings from that. In all, I think the connections we've got, we're developing in the arts area. We were lauded by the Lord Provost of Edinburgh at the reception for the New Zealand contingent. New Zealand was a country of honour, and Dunedin got a big mention throughout that reception. Mainly, I suppose, because we've just met the Lord Provost earlier in the day. I think he was appreciating our presence there, and he could see that we, because Edinburgh was the city that created Dunedin, it was planned from Edinburgh and so on, that we had a real purpose for being there. So I could see some very worthy things coming out of it. We have in Dunedin a Scottish brand, and you'll shortly hear the cruise ship visitors being welcomed by bagpipes in the Octagon. They will look up and they'll see the preeminent statue of Dunedin City is Scott, Robert Burns, of course. And so the connection with Edinburgh is about heritage, and I think it's about giving this, the stronger that connection we have with Edinburgh and Scotland, the more heart that gives to the heritage of the city. We are a multinational kind of population, obviously, these days, but I think we go back to Edinburgh to look to our roots, and to get the creative sector active through whether it's music or whether it's graphic arts or whether it's literary arts. I think is all for the good of Dunedin.
Thank you. Mikael, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, Councillor Peake, with regard to Edinburgh, has canvassed a fair bit of what I would have said, but I guess the context was that we had two purposes in going to Edinburgh, and that was reflected in the fact that there were two invites to us to go. One was from the Lord Provost, and the other was from a combination, I think, of the British Council and Creative Scotland, aided by Creative New Zealand, to engage with a festival, as Councillor Peters said, where New Zealand was the country of honour at the Arts Festival in Scotland at that time. So the two purposes we had, one was to reinvigorate the sister city relationship with our mother city, if you like, and the other was around developing, to a much greater extent, our arts and cultural connections with Edinburgh. And there was considerable opportunity in that, and as Councillor Peters mentioned, the UNESCO City of Literature bid that we're right in the middle of was very relevant to that, because Edinburgh was the first UNESCO City of Literature and basically invented the concept. And we gained a lot of understanding of what that could do for a city and what festivals could do for the city. Edinburgh earns millions of dollars, or millions of pounds, every year from its various festivals, and it gains enormous credence and support from around the world for the UNESCO City of Literature thing. So actually we went over there with a couple of purposes in mind, and we actually gained a tremendous amount more. But on top of that, we were approached by various institutions saying, we would like to partner up with you on this creative writing course, or we would like to partner up with you on this research project, or whatever. These are areas where we have strengths in Dunedin, and the Edinburgh institutions that approached us recognised that and also have strengths. So when we came back, it was, and reported back to particularly the university in this case with regard to what the opportunities are, they saw tremendous potential for benefit to our city as from some of the connections that were proposed. And I reiterate what Councillor Peake said, that our Scottish branding, I think as a city, has been, our Scottish identity and branding has been somewhat underplayed in the last few years. There is enormous potential in this city for utilising that to a much greater extent with regard to festivals and attraction of visitors. So there's no doubt in my mind that we've gained an enormous amount from the visit. With regard to Otaru, there are already, as Councillor Nunes mentioned, it started as a response to a trade connection, but the connections now between Dunedin and Otaru have grown in various ways. The university has a long-standing exchange program with the University of Otaru, which interestingly enough is it's a University of Commerce. That's quite a restricted palette of faculties. But interestingly, and this is an area where they expressed a lot of interest in it, and it's alluded to in the report, interestingly that although they have several million visitors a year, tourists a year come to Otaru, they don't have tourism on their, among their subjects at the university, and they recognised and acknowledged that when we met with the Chancellor or the Vice Chancellor or the equivalent. They recognise that as a real gap. They are not in a position to create such a faculty at the moment, and so they're talking about, and they have in the past sent people to Dunedin to do tourist degrees in tourism. because they recognise that that's a real issue for them and they need to upgrade their skills. So again, we're identifying real potential areas of benefit to our city through the sister city relationship, and you can't identify those without taking advantage of the sister city visits we have and sit down. And we had a very extensive program of meetings with various people in Otaru. One of the approaches we had there was from the aquarium manager, who said that this is a very significant research facility, but also a tourist facility. They explicitly asked that we approach the University of Otago on their behalf to look at connections between the marine research facility here and the marine research facility in Otago. So I've no doubt that there's enormous potential, and we've reported all of that back quite carefully to the University of Otago or to whomever it was directed to, and they are following up for the benefit of the city those approaches, and will pursue them in due course.
Thank you. What I think I will now do is, if anyone has questions or further questions for any of the members of the delegation or Kara, now would be the appropriate time to ask them, and then we'll move into further discussion from members that haven't spoken. Councillor.
My question is, and I'm not quite sure who it is for or whether it may even be for you, is that I understand where Councillor Vanderbilt may be coming from, because this is it's bottom time report of where things are at now, but we actually never get any other follow-up reports from the sister city groups, and I'm just wondering whether we should be having an annual report which actually then gives some continuum and some understanding of that process, and whether that would be possible. It's probably a question to you.
Yep, I'm happy to raise that.
In which case, I think then we will all see the progress which these relationships form. And just only to what I would like to say thank you to the members for attending, because these aren't they're very hard working and a lot of travel involved, and I just want to say thank you to the people for going and attending on our behalf.
If questions, Councillor Thompson.
It's a slightly similar question to Councillor Wilson's. I am particularly interested in the potential value of building a much higher profile festivals calendar, and obviously Edinburgh has expertise and some degree of relationship commitment to perhaps assist us in that regard. So my question is, what is it, I'm not sure whether it's to staff or to those attending, but what's the process that you're going to put in place to take those ideas to the next stages? What happens with those things next?
Well, with regard to the festivals, one of the suggestions from Creative Scotland and the British Council was that we had the opportunity to exchange various performers or art exhibitions or whatever. Some of that happened during the Arts Festival, but we're currently, I know that currently it's been looked at to sponsor a performer from here to Scotland, and we want to be bringing, and I think we're back, the group is coming from Scotland to Dunedin next month. So the ambition is to gradually build up a series of exchanges to enrich the festivals or whatever here and in Scotland, whether that's performing arts or visual arts.
Further question?
Well, yes, I mean, that's great. It seems to me that can build benefit into what we already do, and so I'm not dissing that in the slightest. That's fantastic. But what I'm interested in is the potential to leverage off that Scottish brand down under, and my question is still more around the process for investigating that further. The ideas are are here, the suggestions are here, the commentary's here. What's the process, the plan for taking this to the next stage? And obviously that next stage then requires some form of council approval or political approval or budget approval or whatever, but if it never goes, if there's not a process in place, then it will stop at that point. That's my worry.
I'm just wondering if, Councillor Kate?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, they're good questions. And just let me give you a couple of examples of exchange or interaction in terms of the Edinburgh anyway. My first thought was I was thinking of the Fringe Festival, which we have copied out of Edinburgh, and a lot of cities have. And it all began at Edinburgh in 1947. But the ones that I think that we can develop further as a result of the Edinburgh connection would be the Writers and Readers Festival, which was revived in Dunedin this year, and it's being held again next May, and will then after that become a biennial event. We had an Edinburgh luminary writer out in the form of Alexander Sandy called Smith. There are other prospects. I would I would like and dream of getting J.K. Rowling here, another Edinburgh-based writer, and there are others in that field too. The other development that excites me is the idea of a major military tattoo or Edinburgh-style tattoo that Dunedin could host, and the Mayor and I had met the chief executive and producer of the Edinburgh tattoo, and he has since been out to Wellington and been talking to Wellington about one there. I mean, if we could leverage off something that was visiting New Zealand anyway, that would be positive for us. I mean, we're talking years down the track probably, but nonetheless, I think we have to start these discussions somewhere and get a conversation going with the Edinburgh tattoo at high level in order to attract something like that. That would be quite a coup to have for the tattoo.
Can I suggest that you mention the visit you had here from the representative? Yeah,
well, it wasn't exactly a visit, but it was we talked, Terry Davies, the EML chief executive, and I had a half-hour conversation by phone because Ricky Alfred couldn't actually make it to Dunedin because it was a tight time frame in Wellington. But he has heard, he knows of us. He's very desperate to visit us, and when he can fit the time in. But the follow-up for Wellington, which is set, well, not set, but in terms of a tattoo, there following their year 2000 tattoo, Millennium Year, at the Westpac Stadium. The time frame for that is early 2016, and Edinburgh Festival, the Edinburgh Tattoo, will be sending a delegation into Wellington to talk further about that, and we hope we get them to Dunedin next year.
Sorry, can I just one more there? In that regard, would there be merit in initiating discussions with Wellington around the possibility of sharing something on an alternate basis? And the reason I raise that is my interest in festivals is more around growing Dunedin's brand and bringing people to Dunedin and that kind of thing. I don't get out much, so it's not for me particularly. But the thing that you see with some things that happen every year in a place is, and the Sevens is a very good example now in Wellington, that they lose interest over time. And what we've done with Masters Games, where we've had it on an alternate year and shared it with another city, I think has worked really well and has helped maintain the interest. And I wonder whether we would have absolutely nothing to lose by raising that. Let's see is that worth a go?
Well, I think it is. You might have further comment on that, but you know, even Wellington, we're talking with an Edinburgh style tattoo, we're talking 1,250 performers. They're in big groups, and it's a massive thing to move around the world. But even if we were to get elements, you know, of Edinburgh into Dunedin, I think that would actually give us a boost for such a tattoo at the Forsyth Bar. But anyway, it is worth following up with Wellington, I think, and when some plans finally emerge for the 2016 tattoo.
I think there is another answer to your question as well, which is around the process around events funding, and the events, premier major events strategy was 2009 strategy, and is played for review at some point, at which point this council could make a decision that the model which we currently follow, which is more of a go out to the market and see what events come back to us strategy, is appropriate, or whether we want to be more specific about the types of events or the brands of events that we wish to procure. So that will be something that I imagine that we'll be working on within the next 2 or 3 years, once the arts and culture strategy is completed.
And the World Cup is finished.
And the World Cup is finished. Any further questions? If not, any further discussion on this issue? Councillor Van.
Both the Mayor and Councillor Noon have highlighted that different opportunities that could exist in the future. The point I believe that they're making is that this future has been, looks, if you're going to be very positive about it, looks as though things may come from it. But we have a 35-year history where that future hasn't happened. And in fact, Councillor Noon highlighted the meat trade, which if you look at the top of 6.4, over time how the import of frozen lamb from Port Charles has declined. We've got a situation where over the time of running these sister cities, we haven't actually had an improvement in meat trade. We've had it going the other way. Both the Mayor and Councillor Noon have also highlighted the exchange, youth exchange and educational opportunities. Now, I'm hesitant to suggest that we have far greater youth exchange and educational exchange with Germany, where we don't have any sister city relationship, than we do from Japan. And the reason I'm hesitant is that I don't want there to be a stampede of sister city relationship suggestions with various cities in Germany now, just because we already have so many German students on exchange here. So in terms of the value of trade, the meat trade's been mentioned, in terms of youth exchange, in terms of educational opportunities, even in terms of the festivals which have been spoken about, I struggle to see what it is that we as a city actually get. Where do we actually get benefit? I can see benefit in educational opportunities and exchange, and as I said, we already have those, especially with countries like Germany, but I don't see the sister city relationship actually doing those. In fact, what we should be doing, I believe, is we should be analysing what it is about what we do with Germany that gets us so much in the way of educational opportunities and youth exchange, without there having to be a sister city relationship. So what I would really like to think is that we simply look again at the whole of the idea of sister cities. We have here a 35-year history with Otaru, that in terms of the investment that's gone into it, if you look at what's come back, there is virtually nothing. We have a 31-year history now with Edinburgh, with not really much similar. We have a lot of upbeat talk about what potential there is, but if it's never been realised over all this time, why would we keep doing the same thing? If the sister city relationship is going to be of value, I believe it needs to be looked at again. We need to reconsider what it is that actually gives us real educational opportunities, what actually gives us real benefit to festivals, creative, artistic pursuits, whatever. And recognise also that our history of sister city relationships has actually done very little in any of those areas. We've got much better relationships with countries that we don't have the sister city relationship with. So I'll take the opportunity of putting some written questions regarding this report, detailed ones, to yourself and to Mr. Pickett, and hope that we can move forward in a way that I find more potentially positive. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, just before I come to you, Councillor Noon, we were right at the play. I'd just like to thank Cara and the team for the effort that was put into reporting back so thoroughly. I think it gave certainly me, as chair, a good sense of what your program, your busy program was like while you were over there. I think it has been clearly highlighted that there are significant potential development opportunities, particularly with Edinburgh, as we seek to cement our position in arts and culture as a city that celebrates those in a forward-thinking, progressive, globally relevant way. And I think the point has been made by Councillor Thompson that we need to be ensuring that the process around how we develop that, particularly linking into the arts and culture strategy, is really well thought through, and those links are developed to the extent that they can be. So I look forward to engaging with staff about that and ensuring that we have those discussions. Councillor Noon, you're right on the play.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Can I just pick up on Councillor Wilson's point about reports from the sister city organisations locally here in Dunedin? I think it's a great idea. I sit on the Dunedin Otaru Sister City organisation, so more than happy that there was some formal feedback from that organisation. After listening to Councillor Vandervis, what I said at the front end, he didn't accept what was said around the table, and whatever I say now won't change his mind. However, I'm going to say it anyway. I think it's important for us all to recognise it's not only about our opportunities, but it's continuing on the real and actual relationships that are happening today. There are, in Ataru's case, there are students that come on an annual basis, and if I can recall, I think it was around about August of this year, there was about a dozen 13, 14, 15-year-olds that came and spent a week or so or thereabouts in Dunedin. They were billeted by local people, didn't cost the city a cent. They not only had an experience of Dunedin culture over that short stay, but their host families had an experience of a Japanese culture as well, in terms of what was shared by those students with those families. There's also a Japanese speech competition that's held on an annual basis as well, coordinated by the Otaru Sister City Society, and that's an opportunity for secondary school students to participate, and the winner of that ends up travelling to Otaru. It is subsidised in a relatively modest and small way by the society. So I'm just giving two practical examples of what's actually happening here and now. It's not just about opportunities, it's about continuing on those relationships. And with respect to other comments that Councillor Vandervis has made, I don't know the relationships with informal relationships that currently exist with other countries, and that's great, because as Councillor Peake said earlier, we are a multicultural society, and that's great if those relationships are happening without a sister city. But what we do know as a council is that we have a duty to continue to build on what exists today, And that I believe is particularly important, and if we can have greater information shared by our council colleagues to help reinforce what's going on, well, I think that's great as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Noon. It's been moved and seconded. We've had discussion. I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
No recording, please.
That's carried. Thank you.
I had to get it in the way. I just had some communication from Dr. Griffin. He wasn't aware that community development was this morning. Would anyone be averse to his item, if he can make it, I'm not quite sure if he can, being put back on so he can address some of the issues, the questions that were raised about the Target Museum, if he can get here before the meeting's over? This is the change of the time that has caused the problem. I'm not sure that he got the agenda.
Well, I'm in the hands of the meeting. I personally feel that we could probably take the questions to him.
He has sent me an email already answering those questions, and I can read that if you wish to have it recorded publicly, or I can circulate it. But if anyone had any other, it's whether it's worth him coming on.
I think unless he desperately would like to, I think that we've already covered that issue, that particular agenda item, and it would probably be procedurally difficult to go back to it. So, if you were happy to circulate his response to those.
I'm happy to circulate, but I'm wondering whether you'd like it read in order that it be public at some stage later on.
I think given that we've moved past the agenda item, that is difficult from a procedure point of view.
Is that good?
Thank you. Number 7, submission on more effective social services issues paper. Ulrika and Susie. Welcome. Any introductory comments?
Not particularly, just to thank Susie for coordinating our response on this and really open to any feedback from council. We have the luxury of actually having a submission period that allows for councillor input, so any comments that people have, that would be great.
Okay, we'll start with questions. Any questions of staff on this paper? Is that a question? Yeah, question?
Yeah. Thank you, and thanks for putting this together. I wonder if staff would have any concerns with us including a point in this submission. Apologies for not raising this sooner, given that we did have this opportunity, but just in light of the conversation that we've had with representatives from Presbyterian support this morning and the current climate around social housing, whether there be any issues from your perspective with us including a point declaring our support for the continued role local and central government play in the provision of social housing, as, in the same way that we support a role for social enterprises as part of a range of mechanisms for social service delivery.
I'm not sure that the report specifically kind of addresses housing rather than social service delivery, but
I didn't bring my copy of the report with me, but I didn't see an opportunity to talk about housing when I was reading through it, and if there was, I would have, I'm sure. But if you think that there's a place within the paper itself and the questions they raise, then absolutely.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Councillor Mendes.
In the third paragraph, page 7.4, it says that Dunedin City Council supports local solutions to local issues in social service delivery. Surely a city council is basically supposed to be focused on services to ratepayers, and that social issues, social service delivery issues in particular, are the area of government. Why then do we say local solutions to local issues when in fact they aren't local issues, they are government funding issues? If we are going to take on board the social service delivery issues as being local, I simply don't believe we have the resources to do that. So why do we trot out local solutions to local issues? when in fact it's government issues that we have.
I think the point was more about the solution being focused for the local needs rather than the issues themselves being, like for instance the example we've heard this morning from Presbyterian Support. It's been found that housing issues in Dunedin are different to that elsewhere, and so whilst that's a nationwide issue, housing is a nationwide issue, in Dunedin and Invercargill we have particular issues within that. So for me that clause is more about saying local providers are able to respond to their local needs. Any differences, we're not suggesting that the issues are not national.
So what you're suggesting really is that we do have specific local issues, but that the local solutions to them are actually to be funded by government.
Yeah.
Right. This is something I would like to see much more clear, because what it actually says here is that we support local solutions to local issues. I think what we really support is government solutions to our local issues. But that's just a point of view. If we go down to number 5, the first sentence says, Dunedin City Council supports the integration of services where evidence support the benefits of an integrated approach. Is this a tautology? Does it actually mean anything?
Yeah, so we're saying, as it says, that if evidence supports an integrated response approach, then we support that.
So if evidence supports it, we support it. Neat. All right. Going to number 7, we support progress towards monitoring the outcomes from social service changes. Again, I would have thought this was a government requirement to monitor the outcomes, but what I'm wondering is there a suggestion here that we are going to look at funding an outcome monitoring coordinator?
No.
That's emphatic no. We'll record that. Great. And in terms of using community grants to leverage other funding sources in paragraph 8, the other funding sources, are you talking also about government there, or are you talking about things like the Otago Community Trust?
No, we're talking about, so the reports from the Productivity Commission asking for the public's input into how they can do things better, and we're suggesting that one of the ways in which they can do that, or is to acknowledge that government and local authorities can use their resources to leverage other things, and so we're suggesting that the government can leverage their funding by doing things.
Great. I haven't seen government, I don't think, in any of this. Certainly not.
We're responding to the government, so it's the government asking the questions of us.
Right. If we could perhaps, when you're putting a final submission in rather than a draft one, if you could highlight that we're not expecting to do this ourselves and that it is actually government funding that we're looking to use rather than local solutions to local problems.
Councillor Mendes, I think that is implicit in the fact that we are responding in this submission to a government paper seeking feedback on how they fund social services.
And that's what worries me, because if you have anything that's implicit when it comes to government forking out money, it'll never happen. You need to be very explicit about that, I believe. But that's just a view which I'd like you to consider.
Good question. Councillor Thompson.
Number 8, I'm just wondering whether you feel it's wise to cite the Dunedin City Council's example here. And the reason I ask that question is that indeed we ourselves almost explicitly refuse to fund things that we believe that should be funded by government. And it does strike me that this recommendation is in essence encouraging, it could be seen as encouraging the government to not to fund in full, but to fund in such a way that organisations would be able to get that funding through other grant and social service bodies and things like that. And I just wonder whether the wording might perhaps need to be looked at. I understand what it is that you're trying to suggest, but I'm just wondering whether it does that adequately.
I'm at your disposal.
So, as we go and as questions are flagged, I'm trying to make notes as to what members might like to see different. So I'm wondering whether, for example, to deal with Councillor Band's issue, if we insert the word centrally funded before social service delivery in 3, whether that might clarify things there. And number 8, if we remove the example, i.e. remove the second sentence, would that...
Well, look, I think it would. It's just I'm acutely aware that government increasingly in the social sector is with an expectation that that will force those agencies to find money elsewhere. And there's a kind of a difference in orientation between that model and a model that facilitates service development, which is what you were asking for. I'm not quite sure what the form of words are, but I think it just perhaps needs to be fine-tuned. I'm happy to think about that afterwards. It didn't really occur to me until I was rereading it again.
Okay. Any further questions? Oh, sorry, can't we go on with it?
I'm not sure whether this is sort of actually a question for staff, or that I don't totally understand about what we do with these submissions. I do understand that they go up to central government as a bit of advice about how they should conduct themselves, but I don't totally understand how they fit in with our processes. For example, number 7, saying that we support progress towards monitoring and we see value in. Does that mean we can expect that that should apply here locally? Do we, does it have to fit in with any of our strategies? Does it? I just don't sort of, and as I say, I'm not sure it's a question of our staff so much as a question generally. We don't do these things ourselves necessarily. Are we flagging that we would like to, or that we will, or that we want to put them into our strategies, or are we flagging that we just think other people should and we shouldn't, or what? How does it fit into our stuff? For example, the full range of potential benefits and costs, their impacts on the wider community. We don't factor impacts on the wider community on the whole with what we do. Is this flagging that this is a new thing that we're likely to want to do locally too, or is it just...
I think that I guess any member would have potentially their own take on this, but I think that in relation to submissions, we are responding to a specific suggestion or proposal or question of central government that central government has posed, and we are giving a view in relation to that. There's a certain set of contexts and circumstances in which central government is operating may be quite different to the set of circumstances in which we operate, and as such, what we are advocating for central government to do may not, or may or may not be aligned with what we do here in local government because of those differences. The merits in relation to us adopting a similar approach to that which we are advocating in item 7 could be discussed and debated, but I think that probably would be in a different forum. I think we are doing that to an extent, but there are probably ways in which we could tighten up and refine that approach. So I'm not quite sure whether that is a helpful response, Councillor Calvert, or...
I guess the answer to my question that you're giving me is that this is advice to other people in response to their query for advice, but it isn't advice that we necessarily are either taking or wedded to, in particular for ourselves.
That is my personal understanding of this. Councillor Beaton.
Sorry, we're discussing this, are we? Just one question.
Question time. any further questions? I have one question, and that is whether the word query in item 9 is actually strong enough. I'm not sure whether I certainly would do more than query. I simply would not support a population-based funding as the only consideration in funding models. I think it's a folly. So, yeah.
Shall we change that?
Well, does staff have a view on whether or not query is a strong enough word, or is that a political decision?
I'm fine with making it strong.
Okay.
So what's this challenge
Yes.
Yes.
instead of query?
Challenge or not support?
Challenge.
Challenge is a bit more accurate.
I don't see how we can respond to that when it's supposed to be a question, but I might like to respond to that, and it should be done as part of discussion, Chair.
So we're in a position where there have been various issues flagged around the table with the draft paper here. What I'm going to suggest is that I, as Chair, move the document with 3 amendments based on what I understand to be concerns that have been flagged up through questions. So that is the insertion of centrally funded before social service delivery in item 3 or paragraph 3. The removal of the second sentence in paragraph 8 and replacement of the word query with not support in paragraph 9. Is there a seconder for that?
Well, I'll second that and respect to it if I may.
Thank you. Councillor
I share the caution that Councillor Thompson articulated a little while ago, and I will recall the discussion we had at Council quite recently about this offering up community-based solutions and how problematic that can be. I think this policy development from central government is entirely ideological. It is based around a belief that philanthropy can take the place of central government provision of social services, and that advice from Quangos, such as, for example, the Productivity Commission, actually help, if they're followed by government and agreed to by the community, or the community has to agree to them, allow central government to move away from core central government responsibilities. So I think this area is very fraught. And while I encourage the sort of involvement we have from NGOs in the provision of social services, I think what's happening with public housing at the moment and the divestment of a very large part of the public housing stock is a perfect example of where this process is being driven by the National Party. And so I think this submission is very important. It needs to be focused and sharpened to convey the cautions that I believe are properly expressed by the city around government moving out of providing service in all sorts of areas and moving to service provision models which are already failing overseas and in parts of the country where they've been introduced already. So I think this is very serious. I think it's a massage job, a policy discussion, a massage job on a philosophy which I think is quite alien to this country and particularly to the general social attitudes of the city, and so I'm quite concerned about it.
Councillor Thompson.
Look, I'd agree with all of that. The only thing is I would really caution your suggested change to number 9. My involvement in an organisation that is population-based funded. Firstly, I'd just like to make a couple of comments about that because I think it's relevant to what you're suggesting. The public perception of population-based funding is that it is done purely on the numbers of people in an area, but it's not. It has a range of adjusters built into it that adjust for variables that are considered to reflect need. Now, whether they do that accurately or well is arguable, but I think it's important that we understand that population-based funding is certainly used in that context, is not a straight number. Secondly, the public frequently talk about the fact that health in Dunedin suffers because of population-based funding. I think we need to remember that health in Otago and Southland, health in Otago and Southland actually isn't funded by a population-based funding formula. It's funded by that plus an annual deficit. And so when we talk about the amount of money that's going into an area, it isn't necessarily limited to that one thing. And the reason I make those points is because flexibility is really important. The West Coast is not funded for its health on the basis of its population-based funding formula because it's well understood that it will never be able to be. And the point I want to make is that if you don't have, if you rule that out completely as a methodology, you run a very real risk of disproportionate funding going to places like Auckland and Wellington, and in fact those places like Otago and Southland actually ending up with less, not more. So I think challenge I would be very happy with. Note that it cannot be the only measure I'd be very happy with, but explicitly reject I think is potentially dangerous.
Before I move to further discussion, can I just clarify that not support a reliance on population-based funding as the only consideration does not rule out the use of it as one of a number of approaches. Any further discussion? Councillor Manders.
I would just like to agree with Councillor Thompson that not support to me actually sounds somewhat negative, and what I think we really need to do is actually challenge, and I would prefer the use of the word challenge. I think maybe we should see who prefers challenge and who prefers not support.
What I'm going to suggest that we do is I'll move each of the amendments, proposed amendments separately, and should the last one fail, then anyone perhaps move Councillor Thompson second, Councillor Vanderbilt could move challenge instead of query. Further discussion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move an amendment, further amendment to this, that the Dunedin City Council supports the important roles both central and local government continue to play in the provision of social housing.
Okay, what I'm going to ask is that you hold that until after I move this first round of amendments, and then we'll deal with that one separately. So, what I'll do is I'll move the first one that we basically, the overarching motion will be, as on the order paper, not as on the paper, that the Community Environment Committee approve the draft submission on the more effective social services issue paper with the following amendments. And then 1, the inclusion of the word centrally funded before social service delivery in item 3. So I will move that. It's been moved by me, I can't remember who seconded it, Councillor Pope. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. The second proposed change is the deletion of as an example. That sentence, the sentence starting as an example, the second sentence on paragraph 8. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Fairly delayed. The third suggested change is that we change the word query to not support in paragraph 9. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against?
No.
That's lost. So Councillor Hawkins, you've foreshadowed one, and I think Councillor Thompson / Councillor Vanderbilt have foreshadowed one, so we'll take yours first.
Yeah, thank you. Just that, again, that the Dunedin City Council supports the important role both central and local government continues to play in the provision of social housing, and I would suggest that as a new number 6, but I'm not particularly fussy as to where it goes. It follows on quite nicely from our assertion of the role of social enterprise.
Okay.
Can we have discussion about that?
We can, because I think it's a new suggestion. I think I would just caution, staff have been quite clear that we're not sure that we have the remit to, or that this wasn't something that was sought, or the topic of this.
I've just looked at the, I'm just looking at the terms of reference of the inquiry, and it's about social services, commissioning, purchasing, market for social services. It will cover investigate the arrangements used by government agencies to deliver social services via contracts with non-government providers. This will include examining how agencies choose between contracting and government provision of a service, and the institutions and contracting models that promote good outcomes for individuals, communities and the population as a whole. And it talks about what social services means and society expects government to play a role. So it doesn't talk about the delivery of housing.
So, do we have a seconder for Councillor Hawkins' motion? If not, lapses conscious. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Benvis, do you wish to move?
Oh, I'm just writing something, if you could give me another 20 seconds.
Okay, another 20 seconds, Councillor Thompson. Does anyone else
Look,
want?
it's a minor tonal variation really, but the DCC challenges and over-reliance on population-based funding is the only consideration in funding models. The rest would read as it currently does.
Okay. So that basically removes the words would query.
It's just taking it slightly stronger, but not quite as strong as you were.
Challenges and over-reliance.
Yeah. Is everyone clear on that?
Happy to second.
Seconded. Thank you.
Does it need an over-reliance and only? Isn't that one of these redundant? Don't they basically refer to the same thing? I mean, we're querying an over-reliance on population-based funding, or we're querying population-based funding as the only mechanism, but if it's both, it's a...
Look, if I had more time I could write it better, but in my mind the critical thing is actually about the adjusters that are built into these models and whether they adequately take into account local situations and needs. And so by writing, that's why I was, that's what was in my mind.
Okay. But I think we can, yeah. So removing this, Councillor Benvis, I think you've seconded it, or you're willing to second it. We can have a debate about it in a second. Debate.
Yeah, Chair, I just wondered the addition of the words without adjusters into that sentence that proposed. Would that cover what Councillor Thompson said? I mean, it would certainly, for me anyway, add value to it.
Well, I'd be happy for it to say the DCC challenges and over-reliance on population-based funding, particularly without appropriate adjusters.
Okay. Councillor Benvis, are you comfortable with that amendment? Okay, is everyone clear then on what the amendment is? I think staff have a comment, Rebecca.
Can I just double check that that's population-based funding, particularly without adjusters, as the only consideration?
Particularly without appropriate adjusters.
Without appropriate adjusters as the only consideration in funding.
Okay. Everyone's clear? I will put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Thanks, carried. Okay, that's that. Enough of the political info. Thank you. Youth Participation Advisory Group update. Welcome, Mike. Any introductory comment?
Just to thank the committee for allowing me to present this report, and also acknowledge Councillors Hawkins, McTavish and Mayor Cale for their involvement and input and guidance in the process thus far.
Questions? not, someone can move the report. Councillor Hawkins. Second. Mayor Cull, thank you. Any debate? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. Not a whole lot to add. I just want to take this opportunity, I think, to thank staff for letting us increase their workload over the past year or 18 months or so to include this work. To thank the youth workers that have been involved on the Youth Participation Advisor Group for taking the time out of their hectic schedules to help us, and most importantly to the young people who have been involved in this process so far. I personally think this is a very exciting project, and it's been a pleasure to be a part of it and to cheer it, and I think is part of a greater push, I think, to be as inclusive a council and a community as we can be, particularly when it comes to our decision making. The earlier that we engage with people in our community in a meaningful way, the better off our democratic processes will be, in the spirit of prevention as opposed to cure. And just lastly, I think, in light of the conversation that we'll have this afternoon around our significance and engagement policy, we talk in that about empowering decision making, whereby the ultimate decisions are left in the hands of our community. And my personal view is this is something that we don't do nearly as often as we could do. And I think that the Youth Vote project in particular, as a part of this program, is a great step forward in that direction. So thanks again to everyone for their work in this so far, and look forward to the next year or so ahead as that groundwork comes to fruition. Thanks.
It really worries me how much the slide has been in people voting over the last 20 years, and so I welcome this as something that might make a small difference, but I wonder whether an active program actually needs to start now around engaging the schools around how we could get them to be involved in the next local body elections. It strikes me that it's really hard for schools to build things into curriculum without really long lead times, and if we were to talk to schools about projects that could be put in place around that local body election, next local body election time, and start to work with them around how they could involve students in that. It says if you vote once early, the evidence, I think, is that you continue to vote. And whilst, with rare exceptions, senior high school students wouldn't be old enough to vote, there will be some that probably aren't. Even a dummy vote and a process would, in my view, add likelihood to continued participation in democracy. So I see these suggestions in here as being worthy and valuable, but I just think that engagement process with the schools needs to start now, and to see whether we could put something together. And even if it turned out to be in only a couple of them, it would be better than none at all. So is that something that we could give some consideration to?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the Chief can speak to this, but certainly I think that we have the Dunedin Secondary Schools Partnership around the table. The nature of the discussions to date have been focused on the re-establishment of a group of young people that can speak with their own voice, I guess. Now that, to a great degree, those discussions around a way forward have concluded, I think that the Youth Advisory Group could probably expand its focus to consider some of the wider issues that sit within its brief. So I'll hand it to the Chair to take that on board.
Yeah, and I think these are all very noble and sage suggestions, and we focus, I think, we focus too much on trying to generate interest in the year of an election campaign, when a lot of the senior students, as you say, won't be 18, but the senior students who will be participating in this next year will be potentially eligible voters in the next local body elections in 2016. So, but as Councillor McTavish has said, the focus so far has been building a framework, and then step 2 is supporting that as best we can, and we welcome any input that anyone around this table has to feed into that, certainly.
That's covered.
I'd like to see us not so much focusing on actual voting numbers as the reasons behind them, because I think people do things for 2 essential reasons, partly because other people around them do them, in which case don't necessarily focus on the young people. They're voting, or they always have been voting, because their parents took them out to vote when they went voting, and they came from a family who thought you should be voting. Voting's the thing to do. It isn't necessarily about, even now, people actually take some notice of their parents, surprising amount. So to me it's actually a community-wide involvement. There's no point just telling a pack of school children to vote. And as a second thing, I think people vote because they think democracy is important and they see democracy at work, and we might be better in a school setting, and when we're bringing up the next lot, to help them understand how democracy works by using more democracy in schools and modelling the behaviour that democracy gives you, that gives an added benefit. So I think it's a much wider thing than just telling a whole lot of people, why don't you vote? I think show that grown-ups vote, and that's what we do, that's part of being a grown-up. And so it's getting engagement from the older people who've been giving it. And it's secondly showing why democracy and your involvement and where the majority and minority fits in and those sorts of things might be a more useful thing.
I agree with everything that Councillor Thompson, Councillor Hawkins and Councillor Calvert have said. But I think that there is an emphasis on voting numbers that is misplaced. The number of people voting doesn't actually necessarily give you a particularly democratic purview, especially if you make it so easy for people to vote that they can do it while they're buying their lotto ticket at the supermarket. What we really need is for people to take an active interest in government, local and national. And to do that, we really, and Councillor Calvert brought up the role of schools, we really need to get youth educated, if you like, about governmental systems, about their ability to influence them. We need to convince them that they do have some ability to influence them, and I think that a youthful cynicism that has developed over the last 20 years is largely responsible for the slide in people voting that Councillor Thompson is really concerned about. In the United States, I believe, not that it's a good example of democracy, civics is something which is taught, I believe, in most schools, and certainly in most European countries. Government systems is actually a subject, and the youth of all of those countries actually has a good grounding and a good understanding of what actually happens and how things like list MPs, for instance, come about, or what role councillors actually have in the running of a city. So the peer pressure that Councillor Calvert referred to, the role of schools that Councillor referred to, and the other issues, the slide in voting and the issues that Councillor Hawkins referred to, I think all of them shouldn't end up with simply trying to increase the number of people voting and making it easier for people to vote. I actually worry that we make it too easy for people to vote when people don't really have a lot of understanding about what that vote actually means and how government actually operates. So I think it's a central government issue. I think that if we're to get anything done about it, we really need central government to introduce civics into the school curriculums up and down the country. so that an understanding of how we're governed would then lead to some interest in it, and therefore some really educated voting, which I think is the one thing that could really make a positive difference. I wouldn't get too hung up on the number of people voting. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I just agree with other speakers too, that the whole area of civics education has been truly neglected. And I think it's more than an issue of just voting too. It's about trying to inspire those young minds that we're attempting to see how the councils, the local government actually influences their lives, impacts on them. And so I'm looking forward to seeing kind of the rollout of the roadshow. I'm just wondering, as a question, if I may, just to flesh that out a little bit, as to how many schools the roadshow would engage with, and just to how that's funded.
There are 11 secondary schools in Dunedin City. 12.
So the invitation will be to all 12 high schools in the Dunedin area, and I guess it will just be those schools who will allow the roadshow to come and present in the assembly. We have Gordon Wilson from the Secondary School Partnership, who's basically guiding us around when's a good time to approach schools, so that we have a good opportunity to have the roadshow come and present. The cost of the roadshow will basically be met from our current youth budget.
Okay, super. Well, I think the only other thing that hasn't been said already is Councillor Hawkins thanked, I think, the majority of the people who'd been involved. We also had a group of young people who gave up weekends or after school time to come along and input, and these are their ideas. So these 3 projects were identified as part of the workshops that Ms Evans ran with those young people. So I'm confident that they are projects that will resonate with young people, and I think we have been to thank those ideas.
I share the concerns that many have expressed around the lamentable lack of civics education at a national level, but it seems to me that aside from a few months navel-gazing after every declined turnout in an election, very little has happened in that space. So sitting around and waiting for something to happen in the education curriculum may not be the most productive solution. And so I think, and I also think that we do have some responsibility to help push that work at our end, and this is a step in doing that. I think there's a lot of potential in the roadshow concept in a broader demographic. I mean, we have it's not just a youth issue, the fact that people don't have a good understanding of what it is that we do and what it is that they're paying for. But hopefully this is a start in helping people come to a better understanding around those sorts of things. So, thanks.
With the motion, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? That's carried.
Have some concerns about our current policy for replacement of trees and would like to see that debate happen sooner than later. And just wondering, will it come back to council, any replacement planting or design, or will that be just an operational matter?
Go through the chair, specific reference that made in the report to that we won't be replacing them because we would see any replacement of what is really green furniture in the urban environment to come through as part of the urban design planning for the area. We've spoken with Glenn Hazelton and the team about that. They understand that the octagon, the way the octagon is configured now and could be in the future, is a bigger subject. We see the trees as being part of a plan that's yet to be put together. There will not be a tree plan.
But that will be something that comes before council, or will it be operational?
If I can, I would certainly see it, and certainly the people I've spoken to would see this as something which will be, I guess, a selection of options about redesigning the octagon or looking at changes to the octagon. It will be a major consideration for council.
Right.
Sorry, just to follow up on Councillor Wilson's question about notable trees in the district plan. My understanding was that the trees in the DCC gardens and in parks weren't included in the notable trees for the district plan. Is that the case?
Through the chair, there are a small number, and I do say small trees. I know just off the top of my head, there's a couple of notable trees in one of the cemeteries. The trees along Anzac Ave are registered, but apart from that, the majority of the trees that do have narrow reserves are not listed on the schedule.
So would it be fair enough to say that it's assumed that trees would receive automatic protection in DCC gardens and parks, and therefore there was no point in actually registering them as notable trees with all the paperwork that goes with it?
Through the chair, yes. Working in the parks environment, yeah, we do try and protect the trees as much as we can, and do take caution when trying to remove them.
Thank you.
All right, that's any questions?
So just a question about the middle-aged youngster that also died. Given that clearly couldn't be attributed to any root damage as part of the construction, have you got any understanding of why that happened?
If I can, at this stage, it was an ambitious transplant. It was an attempt to get as big a tree as possible. It was moved from an area where it wasn't happy and it had been unwisely planted, but it was an over-ambitious transplant. Basically, I guess that the engine room below the ground never really caught up with the demands from above. It's a physiological failure.
Picking up on that, is the prognosis for large trees being transplanted dependent on their species overwhelmingly, or not? And my context for that question is my observation when we were recently in Shanghai, or in fact in both parts of China that we're in, is that in China they transplant thousands and thousands of very large trees and prop them up, and they all seem to survive. Now I wonder whether that's possibly conditions or possibly the species they choose. I don't know.
If I can, through the chair, my understanding, and having seen some of those many years ago in Shanghai myself, it's a combination. It's a combination. We very successfully move, I mean, we in New Zealand and we in Dunedin very successfully move large specimens. There's a golden ash in the lower Botanic Gardens next to the Wolf Harris Fountain, which was moved from one side of the park to another side many years ago when the Dunedin Amenity Society paid for the upgrade of the Wolf Harris. It was about 7.5 tonnes in old money, and it was a major transfer. That tree's happier than it's ever been. It's a question, and I guess it's a metaphor for life really. It's how much care, preparation and money you can apply to the situation. In Shanghai they have a reasonably benign, reasonably good rainfall, pretty well defined warm temperate conditions. The soil is by and large semi-alluvial and quite well drained, and some of the species that they use are very fast recoverers, poplars, etc., those kind of trees. And they're proficient. I mean, they have extensive nurseries, equipment to deal with that, and they're dealing with it on a scale where I guess the economics is probably quite viable too.
Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
Just briefly, a follow-up from Councillor Vandervis's question. Are the trees that the council owns a lot less special than privately owned trees? trees? Or, I mean, we just don't happen to own any trees that are worth protecting compared with privately owned ones? Or?
If I can do the chair, no, it's not a question of value. We have the trees in Dunedin, I must, excuse me, now back to the Botanic Garden again, I guess I should have it. The Royal Oak in the Botanic Garden, which have immense cultural and social value. It's just the area they're in already has a level of protection. In the private ownership, certain people, this is not a personal observation, but certain people in the past have expressed concern about the safety or the value of protection for trees in private property, particularly when their property exchanges hands, and the effects that can have on the community. So therefore the protection has been more directed at private property or areas that were seen as vulnerable. Reserves, gardens and managed by local authorities and government tend to have a level of protection which is regarded as already being quite high.
Councillor Venamus.
On the issue of protecting trees, why is it so extraordinarily difficult and why does it take such a long time to actually get a tree onto the notable
Councillor
trees?
Venamus, whilst that's an absolutely appropriate question, I think it doesn't pertain to the agenda paper that we have in front of us, and so I would wonder if you would be so kind as to put it in writing and we can send the response.
I'll certainly do that.
Outside of this. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. You're moving. Is there a seconder? Second, Councillor Peake. Thank you very much. Discussion. If not, I will put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? It's carried. Future of Great Burn Reserve Fund. Lisa, any introductory comments?
Yes, this is just an update report to the committee on where we're at with both the development of Craig Burn Reserve and the remaining funds that are available in the reserve fund following the recent sale of part of Craig Burn Reserve in 2009 and able to fund the development works in the first place. Attached to the report is a copy of the development works for the committee's noting, and also just the Craigie Burn Advisory Committee itself has been looking at some options to put forward to the committee as far as utilising some of the remaining funds. There is still some work that can be done up at the reserve regarding in the future the removal of a number of macrocarpa trees that are on the boundary line along the road, and also a couple of things that probably the advisory committee need to still look at as far as some submissions that came through when the Craigie Burn Reserve was looked at being subdivided off anyway. So there are still a number of works that the advisory committee want to do, but part of this report is just putting through a proposal that takes it outside of the scope of what the advisory committee can do, and that is to look at broadening where Craigie Burn sits within the wider Leith Valley and looking at what's possible as far as progressing, looking at scoping where that sits in the recreational area linking to other reserves and also the biodiversity values that the Leith Valley has. So just ready to answer questions.
Given that essentially any proposal, whether it's this recommendation or some other one, is going to require a change to the trust document or the deeds that it, and so again by definition that means that whatever gets done is outside of the original intentions. What was the reason for deciding to limit the recommendation to just that particular area? Was there any consideration given to whether, if there were a sum of money available to enhance biodiversity, conservation or whatever in the Dunedin area, whether there were other priorities that might be higher than what is being proposed they might get spent on here?
If I may, through the chair, one of the ideas that the advisory committee is looking at is whether there is the opportunity to look at wider Dunedin projects, particularly in that kind of vein. That will still need quite a bit of work. The trust deed at the moment was originally set up and has continued to be tagged to just having money spent on the Craigieburn Reserve. It's been quite specific around that. And so any proposal that comes forward needs to have a wee bit more work put into it and a potential variation or a draft amendment to that deed in order to allow for some of the other works. But it is something that the advisory committee is starting to look at.
But in terms of what we're being asked to approve, in terms of the recommendations, it does specifically limit it to the wider upper and lower Leith Valley. So it would rule out the possibility of looking at a higher priority elsewhere.
So if I may, through the chair, this is a piece of work that the advisory committee thought would be good to kick off with, and when that was at a stage of coming back, would probably be in a potential to be able to bring back other ideas as well to balance the bigger picture.
Well, pick it up in discussion, but would that not be better served by not limiting this recommendation quite so specifically?
I'm open for suggestions from the committee, absolutely.
I would also point out, we did have someone here from the Amenity Society.
Yeah, Robin.
Yes, I can. Robin wasn't able to stay, unfortunately, for until now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vanderbilt.
On the bottom of 10.3, the second bullet point says revising the supplementary agreement to allow part of all of the remaining funds to be used to seed fund other ecological or biodiversity projects that would benefit from the wider Dunedin area. My question is, given that this appears to me to be a productive direction to go in, why is it that this report isn't highlighting that as the first option? Surely if we've got $300,000 to spend and it's not going to be usefully spent on Craigieburn, surely revising the supplementary agreement to allow that to be spent elsewhere should be on the top of the list.
Councillor Wilson.
Well,
has been on the Craigieburn
since 2007.
Yeah.
So this is a scoping. The advisory board has agreed to do the scoping work in order to come back with what we would like to change. So it has other ideas for what it would like to spend the money on potentially as well. In that area, we believe that this area around the Craigieburn can be enhanced in a number of ways, but we just want to scope out the ability of doing something that would benefit not only Craigieburn but the larger area, and then it will come back with one proposal to change the trustee hopefully only once. But there's been a long and lengthy discussion about the process, which comes first. We believe that it's understanding the costs and the benefits that may come with the scoping work on top of the other projects that have been considered. I hope that helps.
Councillor Calvert.
A wee sort of set of questions really. I don't see attached to this anywhere anything from the Amenities Society.
Through the chair, I have received an email just confirming that the Dunedin Amenities Society has, through their meeting, confirmed and passed recommendations that what has been proposed in this report is supported by the Dunedin Amenities Society.
Could we have those attached to reports in the future? Is there any reason why we shouldn't?
Through the chair, it was intended to try and attach a letter from the Dunedin Amenities Society. Just the timing of receiving that and getting this report through I was unable to do that.
The second thing is this development plan again isn't from the advisory committee, well, the second question is who is the advisory committee, and attached to that is this is not from the advisory committee, this proposal, it's from somebody who, presumably somebody's going to pay to develop something else. I'd sort of have quite like to see something from the development committee, whoever that, I now hear Pat's on it, whoever that involves.
Aaron and I were appointed in a council meeting.
Yeah,
and there's 2 members from council and 2 members from the Dunedin Community Society. And staff take minutes and activate generally what is requested unless it's contracted out.
And so this isn't from the amenity, the group, it's from somebody charged with the responsibility of going and being a kid.
If I can, through the chair, can
I don't sort
my
of quite
understanding
understand.
is that any worker, including here, has been commissioned and authorised by the committee.
This report is from staff.
No,
The proposal was one that we went and sought from Paul Pope.
Yes.
By the advisory board. Paul's done substantial works for the advisory board. He is also a member of the Community Society, but it's done at Allen's event from that.
So we haven't got anything from the advisory board, or are we assuming that the staff report is from the advisory board?
The staff report is generated from the decisions of the advisory board.
So are the decisions here that we can see from the advisory board? I'm just a bit...
Would you like minutes of the meeting to be circulated that authorise this report?
Yes, it just sort of talks about other people having involvement, and I just don't see sort of who they are, and if, for instance, with the Amenity Society, if it was left wider, I'd like to be able to canvass whether they had therefore made a decision based on the idea that there might be the ability to spend this money on a wider project or a narrower project, or and so I'm just...
That is a question which we could ask the 2 council representatives on that the advisory group, whatever it's called. Did the advisory group feel that it focused its discussions on the wider Leith area because it felt that it would be important for any work to be adjacent to Craigieburn, or was there wider discussion about the merits of spending this money elsewhere in the city?
What occurs with the chair?
It's very gracious of you. If I can, through the chair, both of those options have been discussed by the representatives on this committee from the Dunedin Amenity Society. They see value in the adjacent development, but also don't want to limit the potential use of this fund to that particular area, and it may be better spent in other areas. I can't speak to the report attached that predates me, that's from 2009. So I can't speak to the process that the committee, advisory committee, went through to sign off on that work. I can only but speak to our current discussions that predate my involvement and have been going, as some have alluded to already, for some time.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? If not, I think Councillor Thompson is proposing a slightly different resolution.
Well, it is, but apparently we don't have it to bring up on screen.
Oh, it's part B, yeah.
I can tell you what a proposed amendment would say, but it's...
So what I would be foreshadowing is that 1 would remain as it is, that 2 would become, firstly it would be 2.1, and it would read, I'm sorry, then there would be a sentence, this is where it's going to be difficult without being able to put it on the screen, start again. 1 will remain as it is, 2 would commence approves funding from the remaining funds to be used to prepare a proposal, Roman numeral 1, to identify,
Why don't we just take a brief
Yeah,
1
I can
minute
find out.
and we've adjourned whilst it was put up on the board,
Just
because
so
I
I
think
can
it would
dictate
be
it
easy
to
to
the account.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, we're starting, kicking back into it.
Okay, so while it's been typed out, the recommendation would read, number 1 would remain as it is. Number 2 would start approves funding from the remaining funds to be used to prepare a proposal, Roman numeral 1, to identify how the Craigieburn Reserve site can be linked to other important biodiversity and recreational areas within the wider Upper and Lower Leith Valley, noting that this is supported by the Dunedin Humanities Society. Roman numeral 2, or whether there are higher priority biodiversity or recreational areas that would benefit from investment by the fund. And then noting that the funding proposal is outside of the provisions of the Craigieburn Agreement, and therefore the agreement of the Council to use the funds for the proposal for the purpose is for that purpose is required. B would then disappear because it's been covered above. 3 would remain the same.
That's great, thank you. Is there a seconder for that?
Could we ask questions
Of the mover?
Please.
Before it's seconded?
Well, otherwise I don't know whether I can second it or not. So, when you had two
Dave?
Oh, right. You had a proposal to identify 2 things. The second one, how do you propose, what's the mechanism for doing that? I'm just clarifying what you're actually using the funds for.
I don't know. It's just that the reason I'm suggesting this change is because the recommendation that we're being asked to move specifically limits staff to one option, and yet staff are saying to us that in fact they want to the intention is to consider wider options. So I'm just trying to clarify that.
So if I may, through the chair, just that the funding that's being suggested will be used for the scoping for the Leith Valley work, but it allows the advisory committee and staff to go away and do some more work themselves. The only additional expenditure around that could potentially be drafting up an amendment, a supplementary deed amendment to the existing draft to bring to the existing agreement to bring back to the council table.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, I'll come to you. Was that a clear answer to your question?
Well, I suppose that I take the point that it's scoping the current proposal, but to the extent that you scope the proposal and that leads to a cost associated with doing it, you're essentially committing the money. You're already going down that path. I would want to be able to question whether
I understand your intention. Yeah. My question was whether you had the answer that you needed in your vision.
I don't think that the scope of the second part is clear enough to know what it is that we're looking at and what you're telling people to do. It's not clear.
So, Councillor Calvert, you're willing to second?
Yes, because I don't know what the thing said in the first place, so if it's still unclear, I don't...
Okay, so...
At least it extends out.
When it gets up there, if the Mayor feels that there is some clarification that could be put in there to make it clearer, then I'm very happy to have that. I'm trying to do something on the hoop and it's not a good idea.
So it's been moved and I think seconded. There are questions, so I'll take the chair of the committee.
Just a question for the mover. I'm a little anxious around a motion that says that we have the support of the Amenity Society, which we do for these recommendations, and then goes on to suggest something that has never been put before the Amenity Society statement.
Well, that's why I've taken it out of where it sat and put it specific to that first proposal, to Roman numeral, what will be Roman numeral 1 when it looks up there. So it's noting that the Amenity Society supports the proposal that's here. It's not an overarching support to anything wider.
So anything wider would have to go back to them for approval before we could pursue it.
Well,
That's why we should have had to, knowing what they were actually supporting in the first place.
Through the chair, the Dunedin Amenity Society have 2 members on the advisory board, and were copied in on this report before it was put on the agenda for being accepted. They are party to the wider discussions that are being talked about here, and were in full support of looking at some wider options scoping outside of Craigieburn. So I think that it would be reasonably comfortable to take it that Dunedin Amenity Society do support those recommendations, but I would.
Yes, I think, Lisa, Ms. Wheeler, the concern is not about whether or not there is Amenity Society support for a wider scoping study focused on the Leith Valley area around Craigieburn. There is concern being articulated that perhaps, and we don't know, whether or not they would be supportive of a wider resolution which enabled scoping across the city.
If I can, to the Chair, I've been assured that the bullet point that was referred to previously, I think by Councillor Pendergast, on 10.3, the second bullet point at the bottom, revising the supplementary agreement to allow part or all of the remaining funds to be used to seed fund other ecological and biodiversity projects that will benefit the wider Dunedin area, that the Amenity Society are comfortable and embrace that.
Okay, so Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Vandas.
I'm concerned, without having seen the new motion up, which I'm sure is going to happen soon, but I don't want to delay debate for that. The prioritisation that Dunedin Amenity Society has given this work is to look within the Craigieburn catchment first and foremost. They have a set specific point to do the first part of the work and think that that's reasonable and want to follow through with this. They've been waiting a considerable period of time to do this. With the addition of this new resolution, I'm not quite sure who that work is meant to be done by, and I have real concerns about doing that work without us having done an environment strategy ourselves. So I think this will only delay some positive and proper work being done in the meantime, while we get our own house in order, which unfortunately we do not have an order at the moment because we don't have a strategy that covers that stuff off to help prioritise it. So I will not be supporting that amendment. I think they've been delayed long enough, and there's some really exciting work that they think will benefit Craigieburn well within the agreement already being considered.
Councillor Vandas. I would prefer that we do questions of the mover and seconder and then move into debate after that, because we still haven't had comments on.
My question, I think, is actually of the Chair, and that is, would you be prepared to accept an alternative motion in the event that Councillor Thompson's motion fails? A simpler motion, simply which says revise the supplementary agreement to allow part or all of the remaining funds to be used to seed fund other ecological biodiversity projects, as has just been quoted by Mr. Rees, and has the approval of the Amenity Society. Have that as the second part of the second recommendation.
Yeah, look, I take it as a foreshadowed motion, which is totally fine. And,
okay, I'd just like to foreshadow that motion.
Sure. Okay. So if there are no further questions of the mover and seconder.
Well, there is a question, and this goes to some degree to why I was not clear. 2.2 doesn't make sense. If you read it, approves funding from the remaining funds to be used to prepare a proposal, or whether there are higher priority one. It's got to be something like prepare a proposal to determine whether.
That's fine, I'm happy to have that.
That's the first thing. The second thing, the question I ask is, does the current deed allow for funding to be applied to this wider exercise?
It doesn't, which is why noting that the funding proposal is outside the provisions of the Craigieburn Agreement and is therefore has come. I don't think that's quite right, Joe. That's saying noting, but basically that it has to come back to council for agreement.
Come back to council or go to the amenity society?
Both.
It's a joint venture.
So, can we just clarify the way that this, Councillor Thompson, were you happy to move the words "to identify" to "after proposal"? And then it reads as a resolution. Should? What?
Oh, sorry, can you say that?
If you move the words "to identify" in "I", to identify, if you move those to after a proposal in the previous line.
Two will make sense. Two will make sense.
Just put and if two and or whether there are so then essentially the proposal is the two are linked together.
Take out the full stop after society, take away little 2 and put 4 with a small r. I mean,
Okay. So I think we move into debate on this item. There has been a foreshadowed motion from Councillor Vandervis. Debate. Councillor Vandervis.
Although I appreciate the positive intention of Councillor Thompson, I'm a wee bit worried that we have here a big pot of money that is going to be used for scoping linkages to produce a paper trail. And I don't believe that we need to actually do that. Regarding whether or not there are higher value biodiversity areas around, I believe that staff would already know this. Rather than produce yet more reports, and with all respect to the Craigieburn Committee, I think that given that we have a large pot of money and we have a whole lot of things that staff would do very, very positively to act directly on biodiversity options around the city, I think that we should simply go for an agreement that allows revisiting the supplementary agreement to allow staff to be able to do what they think is appropriate with the money.
Further debate? Councillor Wilson and Councillor Peake.
I'm not quite sure the point of order, but with all respect, this is a joint venture where the money has been put aside. It's about scoping the project in collaboration with the Dunedin Amenity Society, not telling our staff to do what they wish with the money, which is quite different. And this is about working forward. Again, I'm going to repeat, I cannot support this amendment because, sorry, it will just delay the process when the process is fraught because we do not have our own environmental strategy in place that can inform number 2 at all. They've been considerably delayed already. I think we just let them get on with the project that works best for Craigieburn within this area in present.
Councillor Peake.
Yeah, I was relaxed about the recommendation. Although I take the point from Councillor Wilson that society hasn't been putting a bit more on the society than we think. It's a pity that Robin Hyman had to go, otherwise we could probably resolve it. But nonetheless, I'd just like to say that the thrust of it is fine by me. I mean, the Craigieburn Reserve of 2 hectares of bush and cleared area that was an old farm is a wonderful example of 19th century socio-environmental experience. It is, and the stories there are really inspiring, and I congratulate the advisory group, council staff and Amenity Society for producing such a thing. In terms of its further development, I see immediately in the lower Leith the connection with the Ross Creek Reservoir, and the network of tracks around that strengthened so that people are enticed to go further and have a look at this Craigie Burn Reserve and see the social sort of setting that was around in the late 19th century, and just how it worked in the early 20th. And so that would be where I put priority first. It's right immediately next door, so it's not something they have to look very far to improve, but that connection with the network of tracks around Ross Creek Reservoir would be where I'd start, and I can see that wouldn't require all of the funds, only a small proportion of it really, but that would be an improvement.
Thank you. Further discussion. Councillor White.
Yeah, I'm pretty relaxed about it too, and I think Councillor Pete summed it up pretty well. The one issue I look at is I think some councillors, and I'm one of them, probably don't really understand the whole issue here. And would there be any possibility, and I know this is not quite going into the debate, but deferring until the community environment on Monday the 9th of February and having a site visit before then, and looking at some of the other ramifications around it?
I think that this report has been subject to considerable delay in terms of getting it to community environment already, so I think the Amenity Society would probably value an indication one way or the other before next year, so as to ensure that they can move, or the committee can move forward. Yeah. But I'm sure that they wouldn't be averse to taking any councillor that was interested on a site. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and you're right in suggesting that this has been the subject of considerable delay. This was a process that we were going through at the start of the triennium when I first became involved in this, and it's taken us this long to get here, so I do have concerns about delaying it even further. To be honest, it wasn't a project that I was overly familiar with before I became involved in running it, and I think that speaks, and it's a very impressive project, and I think that the Craigie Burn Reserve on that site and adjacent sites has a huge potential for us, both recreationally and educationally, as has been evidenced by the work that has been done, both from an arboricultural perspective by the Otago Polytechnic and from a social history perspective with regards to the work, the LEOTC work that Toitu have been piloting in this area. It was never, I realise it's not a common feeling for us to be sitting around the table with a pile of money to be arguing over how it best can be spent. But it wasn't, my understanding is it wasn't ever intended that there would be a Craigie Burn Reserve Fund. It just so happened that the money that was generated from the subdivision to fund the work on that site was substantially more than it needed to be, and I think part of the credit for that has to go to the contractors and the Amenity Society and those people who have been involved in that for being able to do it as cost efficiently as possible, and it would seem churlish to then punish them by taking control out of their hands for what to do further with that fund. I mean, looking at the scope of Tutu concerns me. I can easily see, $300,000 being whittled away on scoping any potential biodiversity or recreational project in the greater Dunedin area, as vast as it is. So it's that, I think, that I have the most concern with. I think, yeah, so I can't support that if the intention of that is to come before being able to advance any work. that happens in the immediately adjacent area to the Craigieburn site, which makes the most sense to me as a place to start.
Look, as I understand this, this is not a council fund. This is not council money, even if we had it. It is a fund that, as Councillor Hawkins has said, is fortuitously here because of the proceeds of the sales, and it has with a trustee, certain parameters around how that can be used. And so I understand that the society at the moment couldn't support using that fund to do wider scoping because it's not allowed for in the trust deed. So if we go down that, so the deed would have to be changed before, even if they were agreeable, before it could be used for that purpose. The trust has already agreed to the recommendations that were put in front of us. That work would have to be done anyway because you want to do the work in the immediate area. And if Councillor Vander's observation that, in fact, our staff are probably in possession of some facts around the prioritisation of other things in the community anyway, then that work can almost go ahead by default while this is happening. So I can't support this because I think it'll just delay things against the will of the and agreement of the Amenity Society who are our partner on this. And I think it would be better to go back to the original recommendations, and this work will get done, but the priority work in the Leith Valley, which has already been agreed to, will be done first, and done immediately.
Councillor Calvert.
I do take the point that these funds did come from Craigieburn and were expected to stay in Craigieburn. I think it's a wee bit disingenuous, however, to say that if we extended it as in two, it would breach the original agreement, because the reason this is in front of us is that because already the proposal is outside the original agreement. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be looking at the proposal that's in the report. So it seems to me that widening it, it's being widened in some respects. It's just a question of how far that widening will be, and it's a significant amount of money, and we don't actually have much in the way of a reasons behind where it's going and why it should be outside the initial Craigieburn agreement in the first place. So I think if we're going outside it, we may as well look a bit more generally, and we can do that reasonably urgently, I believe.
Okay, there's no further debate. I do have a view on this. I think that there are a number of very worthy projects in terms of ecosystems and recreational assets around the city. The Amenity Society regularly comes and appears before us every annual plan and champions a number of those, and a number of those would be high on this council's agenda to progress should we have the funds available to do so. I do think that a number of those are very worthy of consideration, and I think Councillor Wilson has highlighted the lack of an environment strategy as being a real hurdle to us having an idea of what the priority might be for those that for an investment fund like this, when we are requested to express a view on the merits of one project over another. However, I do note on page 3 of 5 that options have been considered, including the possibility of applying these funds to a broader suite of projects or a broader range of projects, and the joint committee has come back to the view that these funds would most appropriately sit with a broader project in the Upper Leith Valley. I think in the absence of an environment strategy giving us a clear signal as to whether or not this is the highest priority for council, I think it would be difficult for us to make another decision. I think in an ideal world we would have an environment strategy in front of us today that could provide that guidance. However, that is not the case. So in the absence of that, I don't think it's fair that we wait or tell this committee that it needs to wait another year for us to give a signal on that. And I think ultimately that is what would be required with to give any weight to or a considered assessment in that area. So I support the initial scoping exercise. I think that even if we collectively with the Amenities Society decide that that is not the most appropriate way to spend that money, I think that it will be a proposal which has ongoing value to the community going forward, because I would be very surprised if it wasn't a project that we saw merit in investing in at some point in the future. Right of reply.
That's nice, given I didn't get a chance to move it. Had I done so, I might have made the point that this is not delaying anything. This is approving what was originally approved, but providing the freedom to have a wider perspective around the balance of the fund. What was being sought was the ability to spend approximately $25,000, which is about 10% or less of the fund. And what this was enabling, or what I was intending that this would do, would provide a signal that that council was prepared, if it's got to change this deed, that it was prepared to change it in a wide sense rather than a narrow sense. It doesn't stop the group that's administering this funds choosing to spend it in one area, but it sends a clear signal that council would entertain and would be sympathetic to a wider consideration of priorities. It does not, as several speakers have said, delay anything. 2.1 is exactly what they were seeking support to do, and 2.2 does not say you cannot do 2.1, it says and or. It leaves it entirely in their domain to progress 1 as the original proposal allowed, and also allows them to consider whether or not they might wish to come back to council around the further expenditure of other sums of money in areas outside of that area. If they choose not to, if their scoping report suggests that they would spend all available to them on that, and that's their highest priority, it leaves them completely free to do that and progress that. So I can't for the life of me understand how this slows anything down, makes them wait another year or anything else. It simply says we're prepared to entertain a much wider change to the deed than you're asking us to contemplate at this point in time, and it doesn't stop you what you're asking us for permission to do right now. So it's giving them a width and a latitude that the previous recommendation simply didn't. That's all.
I will put the motion.
Point of order. I indicated to you prior to the right of reply that I wish to speak.
And you did.
No, I indicated to you the second time that I wished to speak. You saw me raise my hand, you looked at me quizzically, and then went on and allowed the right of reply.
I apologise, I didn't notice your hand being raised the second time.
I had it like that and you looked at me. Never.
So I apologise, Councillor Benvis, but I think procedurally there's not much I can do about it now. I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
No, record it please.
I think probably if Councillor Benvis is recorded and probably a show of hands. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against, raise your hand. That's passed. Thank you. So in terms of, all right, councillors, I have conferred with Ms. Graham, and in the interest of us having a lunch break before council commences, the grants policy review paper, it is suggested that we move that to the meeting of the 15th, the council meeting of the 15th of December, so as to ensure that we can cover it there. So procedurally to do that, I will move a procedural motion that we simply move this paper through to the council meeting, and I will then ask that we do cover off that item 13, which just means going into non-public. That completes everything except this grants review paper in this meeting. So I'll move that we move this grants policy review paper to the December 15th meeting of council. Seconded Councillor Pete. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. And I'll move that we move into non-public for the reasons